I've been thinking a lot about what is helpful, what is useful to people, what will build up the children of God and, you know, lead others to become children of God. What's going to be effective, what's going to be helpful. And the local church is always a concern, I think, seeing as I have very little to do with any other church. So always thinking about what can I do to help you all, the congregation here, to build up, to edify, and thinking about teaching. And, we're all of us teaching in this world. We're all, as Christians, living before others, setting examples before others, but also, as there is chance to do so, pointing to the Bible and do some teaching and try to get people to think about their souls and think about eternity and read the Bible for themselves. And in that vein, we're talking about teaching the world. And that is good for everybody. It strengthens us to teach and to help others on. And there's no reason why we shouldn't do so. Even the youngest among us, have obeyed for a reason. You knew what you were doing and why you did that, why you had to do it, and that's enough to tell somebody else what they need to do and why. But when we look at teaching the world, one of the things that comes up, and we'll be looking at 2 Timothy 2, but one of the things that comes up is the idea of quarrels and fights. And wanted to explore this topic with you somewhat open-mindedly. I can make an example of myself, and yet it's really for all of us who are, hopeful that we'll reach somebody with the gospel in this world. And so, in thinking about this, I would start with this idea that we cannot teach people who are around us if we are not, in some measure, selfless about that. It's almost never in your self-interest to teach and to teach the Bible and to speak about God and what is right is almost never in your self-interest. It's never, popular and accepted and acceptable. It's almost never what everybody already believes. You have to be selfless to do this. And yet, if we're not selfless, if we are concerned about what people think, or maybe some of the things that are brought to bear against you, if you stand with the truth, sometimes people will malign your own character, or things that you have said or done will be brought up. If you cannot let that go and let that bounce, that becomes a fight. And now you're not teaching anymore. Now you're fighting. And this is only going to ruin people. The people who are listening, the people who are hearing, the people who should be influenced by us are instead being ruined by us. This is kind of the big picture today. But we're starting at 2 Timothy to look at these things, because in 2 Timothy, there's a picture of the Lord's servant. And as mentioned, I do understand that Timothy is an evangelist, and that there is a specific concept of the work of an evangelist, then maybe you would say that the Lord's servant in 2 Timothy 2 is the evangelist. But I think that's maybe true in an official capacity, but really, this is anybody who is a servant of the Lord, anybody who is trying to teach others. And, well, who should that be? Well, that should be all of us. We're all trying to reach somebody in life, some family member, some coworkers, somebody who might be looking for the truth. All of us are the Lord's servant. So as I said before, I'm willing to make myself an example, but, it's not just for preachers. 2 Timothy 2, verses 14 to 17 is what we're talking about. Where Paul tells the evangelist, the young man, to charge the congregation before God. Charge them before God not to quarrel about words, which does no good, but only ruins the hearers. Right. Allowing ourselves to be drawn into arguments, human reasoning, doesn't actually accomplish anything that's good. It just ruins people who are listening in on that. Instead, verse 15 continues, do your best to present yourself to God as one who is approved, a worker who has no need to be ashamed, rightly handling the word of truth, but avoid irreverent babble. So back up a little bit here. He said at verse 15, we're not quarreling about words. We're doing our best to present ourselves to God as one approved. This is about God's esteem. God is the one who is to be pleased with what we are saying and doing. Men may or may not be pleased by it. They may be thankful that you said something, and I hope that they are, but they may not. It's God whose approval we seek. Do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a worker with nothing to be ashamed of, meaning you haven't been standing around. You've been working. When the boss returns, when the master comes back, you have something to show for it, for the time. You've been doing things. You've been working. In this case, rightly handling the word of truth, fair enough, because we are talking about Bible study. But avoid irreverent babble. This is very similar to what he said earlier about quarrels about words that ruin hearers, ruin those who hear you. Here we avoid irreverent babble. And there's a reason for that. Irreverent babble will lead into more and more ungodliness. It leads people into more and more ungodliness. Irreverent, meaning not holy. Just stuff that doesn't refer, is not spiritual. And the talk will spread like gangrene or cancer. But the talk spreads. The irreverent babble is, again, it's just something secular, something that's not actually spiritual in nature. It seems like it's spiritual maybe, but it's not spiritual. These should be avoided. When you're trying to help somebody, in life to know God, you avoid, when you're having a Bible study, you avoid the study of any other text, just the Bible. And you should be able to point to the Bible for anything. I will tell you a story, which I might have told before, but whatever. I was studying with a gentleman, a gospel preacher, a well-known gospel preacher, a well-known debater, in fact. And I was saying to him, I would like to talk with you about this matter. And it's not terribly important, but there's this thing here that I don't know why you support this. I think we should talk about this. We're going to need to talk about it. And he replied to me, and it was email, and he replied to me with, I don't think we need to talk about it. You should read this debate. And he gave me the name of a debate that was held on that topic. And this is a gospel preacher, you know. And he thought that was the right answer. He thought that was the right answer. But that's clearly not the right answer, isn't it? Like, what kind of gospel preacher doesn't answer a Bible question with a Bible verse? If the debate had anything useful in it, and it may have, I'm not sure, I never read it. If it had anything useful in it, and it may have, there might be value in some of those things. The value that it has would be what? What do you think? What would be valuable about it? What could possibly be valuable? Would it be the eloquence of the men speaking, the credentials that they bring to the table when they put forth their opinions? The rhetoric, the logic, the consistency. What is it going to be? Right? No, it's none of those things. Although these are all things that people think are great. They're not great. They're self-aggrandizing. They glorify man, not God. You know what would be good? Would be whoever showed up and said, here's what the Bible says. What you're saying is wrong for these reasons. Here are the Bible verses. Here's what the Bible puts forth. So even if you read this debate and you learned from this debate something that was a Bible answer to my Bible question, your answer to me should not be, well, just go read this debate. Your answer to me should be, here are the verses. Right? Because the Bible is the source. The Bible is the authority. I never read that debate, but I've read the Bible many times over. I'll probably read that debate one day. I don't know. It's pretty far down the priority list. But that's irreverent babble, is what I'm saying. It's something extra biblical. It's not the verses. You have to insist on the verses. That's why I'm telling that story. And that particular fella, you know, was never, he was never known for his humility. Let's just put it that way. It leads people to more and more ungodliness. The more we like fighting and arguing and, flexing our muscles and our minds over other people, the worse it is, the worse it gets. Also in 2 Timothy 2, at the end of this passage, in the 23rd verse, he tells Timothy, have nothing to do with foolish, ignorant controversies. You know they breed quarrels. So we're avoiding the irreverent babble. We're avoiding the human wisdom, the human reasoning, and we're avoiding foolish, ignorant controversies. Just things that they're just not relevant to the doctrine of Christ. Just don't even bother to address that. The Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome. That leads to quarrels, and the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but rather kind to everyone, able to teach, patiently enduring evil, correcting opponents with gentleness. When the controversy is brought, you don't take hold of the controversy. When you look at what they did, when they brought things to Jesus, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? He did not answer the question, did he? They did not take hold of that political conundrum about the independence or lack thereof for Judea in a modern state under Roman rule. He said, well, whose money? Who made money? Who made currency? Where did this come from? Well, that's his. Let him have what is his. What's that have to do with God? Give God what is his due. It's not quarrelsome. You don't take hold of the controversy. It breeds quarrels. Remember the Sadducees brought to him the woman who had had 7 husbands, and which of them will she be married to? That's a foolish, ignorant controversy. They're ignorant of the power of God's word. They're ignorant of eternal life and the nature of eternal life, that we are neither male nor female in the afterlife, not given in marriage. But also, it's foolish and ignorant because God said to Moses, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, all 3 of whom had been dead for centuries when he said that to Moses, and he's not the God of the dead. He's the God of the living. So this is a foolish question indeed, because it assumes that there is no life after death, when the Bible clearly says that it is. That's a foolish, ignorant controversy. That's why you don't engage it. The Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome. And it's quarrelsome to take on things that are brought that are just fleshly things, earthly things, political things. Leave it. Stick with the Bible. The response is kindness, aptitude to teach, meaning you're ready, you're able, you know what the Bible says. Patiently enduring evil means mistreatment. Patiently enduring mistreatment is what it means. That people are going to say bad things about you, going to say bad things to you, maybe, sometimes, because they don't like what you're saying. And you accept that and keep moving. Roll with it. That's par for the course. And sometimes really bad accusations will be leveled, and they're false. And you know they're false, and God knows they're false. And you keep teaching. Correcting opponents with gentleness. And there is that gentleness, the opposite of fighting and quarreling. You see, there's a selflessness that runs through all of this, that we are trying to accomplish God's things in God's ways, and we do so by means of putting that word out there and taking ourselves out of it. But too often people read, that 2 Timothy 2:15, rightly handling the word of truth as, being a very good debater. And that's not the meaning of it at all. Actually, that's not the meaning at all. That's far too often. Rightly handling it in this case means teaching it accurately, teaching the whole picture here, which includes our own humility in this. We're losing sight of it and mixing ourselves into it, taking it personally. Say things about you, we'll ignore it. Stick with the word. If you look forward in 2 Timothy 4 about this, at verse 16, Paul said, "At my first defense, no one came to stand by me, but all deserted me. May it not be charged against them." That's the attitude we have to take in order to be teaching the lost. No one may listen at first, but we don't hold it against them. The Lord stood by me, he said at 2 Timothy 4:17, and strengthened me, so through me the message might be fully proclaimed. And that's what we want. We want the message to be proclaimed fully through us, ourselves as vessels, servants, conduits. Look at some Proverbs with me. I thought this was interesting. Are you the person of God who is able to teach? Well, how is your attitude? Can you accept wrong against yourself? Can you correct with gentleness, understanding that they don't know and they don't mean it? Can you show kindness to everyone, including those who are not kind to you? Well, the fact is we have a lot of Proverbs about it, and they're very useful. But we're just straight teaching out of the book of Proverbs here. Proverbs 15:18 says, a hot-tempered man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger quiets contention. Right. You want to avoid a fight? The way to avoid it is to be slow to anger. Don't let it get under your skin. Don't take it personally. Taking umbrage or say, oh, that's an affront. It doesn't matter. Hold the word. Insist on the word. Be slow to anger. They don't know. They don't understand. That's how you quiet contention. But the hot-tempered man, the one who flares up, and that's where the strife comes. That's where the quarreling comes. That's where the fights come. You can't be like that and be a faithful child of God. You got to do something about that. Proverbs 17. Proverbs 17, verse 1, to begin with. Better is a dry morsel with quiet than a house full of feasting with strife. It's true. Take, the situation that might be more difficult or tenuous. Take the situation that maybe is not as comfortable with quiet. If we can get to a place where we have that understanding, where we can speak amicably and in love with one another, then it doesn't matter how little we have. And yet, if there is strife, if there is argument, it doesn't matter how much we have. You see it. You see it, Houses full of feasting, but also full of strife. Where the families, they don't smile because there's nothing to smile about. They're at each other's throats all the time. That's not good. That's not the Christian way. It's not God's way. Better is a dry morsel with quiet. We love peace. We love people. We love the ability for us to be together, to come together, to serve God, to learn from one another, to learn from our mistakes. There has to be room for that. Proverbs 17:14, the beginning of strife is like letting out water. So quit before the quarrel breaks out. Because once you let water out, it's out. You can't do anything. You spill water on the ground, on the table, on the floor. That's it. You can't drink it now. Can't get it back. Strife is this way. Once the fight breaks out, you're fighting. That's changed the character and the nature of what is being done here and what's being accomplished and who's being served. It's over. You have to stop that from happening. Quit before the quarrel breaks out. If you're going to teach the lost, you're going to be mindful of that. The 19th verse, whoever loves transgression loves strife. He who makes his door high seeks destruction. Making the door high, meaning making the barrier, making it hard to get to you. This is just saying sometimes people like fighting and they like taking defense and they like the argument, the tit for tat. It's a game to them. But in fact, it's no game, it's transgression. It's not hurting, themselves, they think, but it is, whether they realize it or not, and it is certainly hurting the others. As Paul said to Timothy, quarrels about words profit nothing. They lead only to the destruction of those who are hearing it. It's transgression. Fast forward in the Proverbs to the 26th chapter. In the 20th and 21st verses. For lack of wood, the fire goes out, and where there's no whisperer, quarreling ceases. As charcoal to hot embers, and wood to fire, so is a quarrelsome man for kindling strife. Yes, for lack of wood, the fire goes out. See, it has to be fed. Fighting has to be fed. Taking it personally has to be fed. There has to be a there. They say bad things about you, and that gets your hackles up. And now you're mad, and now you're defending yourself. Yeah, no, that's wood for the fire. That's charcoal to hot embers. Right? You're the fuel. Don't be the fuel. For lack of wood, fire goes out. Where there's no whisperer, quarreling ceases. Don't be the fuel. A quarrelsome man kindles strife, as the charcoal sets hot embers to blaze, as wood, fire. Which is true. You throw another log on the fire, you see a very large flame, right? You put a new charcoal onto existing pile, you see a flame at first. It gets very hot, flare up. But we're just saying, when we take it this way, when we are not able to get ourselves out of the middle, when we get led down rabbit trails of arguments, debates, philosophies, politics, we've become the wood that fire burns. We've changed the character of that conversation, and it's no longer serving God. In Proverbs 30 is this advice in closing. Verses 30, 32 and 33. If you've been foolish, exalting yourself, or if you've been devising evil, put your hand on your mouth. This is an interesting thing. Whatever it takes is what this means. Intervene. If you have to get down to physically stop yourself from talking, do it. Exalting yourself, devising some evil thing, put your hand on your mouth. Stop doing this. It's foolishness. For pressing milk produces curds, pressing the nose produces blood, and pressing anger produces strife. Those things are related to anger. Milk is otherwise good, but it can be turned into something else entirely. The nose, of course, has a certain purpose, but it can also bring forth blood. And there is a just anger. Be angry and do not sin. There is and indignation on behalf of justice that is righteous, but there is also the anger that is selfish and produces strife. Let's look at James 4 for a minute. Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is this thing, as we talked about. Speaking of Proverbs, what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Isn't it this, that your passions are at war within you? That's what it comes down to. Could it be that my teaching, when I'm teaching the lost, is not effective because I'm not seeking God's will, but my own? I'm following my own passions. My own goals are interfering with God's goals for this conversation. What causes quarrels? What causes fights? Isn't it this, your passions are at war within you? Yes, it is this. That's where that comes from. It's revealing impurities in myself. You desire and don't have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and don't receive because you ask wrongly, to spend it on your passions. The passions that are at war within you. Adulteresses, don't you know? Friendship with the world is enmity with God. Yep. We can't have these competing interests. Whoever wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. We'll be found fighting against him. We're contrary to his purpose. Like we said, we had this conversation going. We're trying to help somebody perhaps to know what the scripture holds for them and for their lives. And somehow we got baited into this sidetrack, defending ourselves or our practices or the congregation or whatever. And now it's devolved into an argument, a fight. It's changed. And we're trying to make it pleasing to them, trying to make it palatable to them, trying to make it something that they could understand and that they could take. Don't do that. God knows how to reach people. He knows how to reach people. Use the word. Get them to read the word. That desire to be friendly with the world is what makes you an enemy of God. It defeats God's purpose. It defeats God's mechanism for reaching the lost, which is his word. Yes, that's why we argue, because we have other desires besides his. We have a will for other things besides his glory, and our selfless, maybe we see something, maybe we don't. Maybe somebody says thank you, maybe they don't. This is the thing about it, quarrels and fights are not just, it's not just, throwing punches and slaps. People always think of physical violence when they think of the quarrel, the fighting. It's not limited to physical violence. That's why 2 Timothy said what he did, avoid the irreverent babble. It leads to quarrels. Avoid quarrels about words. It destroys the hearers. Be diligent to show yourself approved, rightly handling the word. These are wars of words. These are quarrels of words. And we're dealing with the concepts of the Spirit. So when we're teaching others, we're trying to reach them with the gospel. We're trying to reach with the word of God. Let the word be the thing that does the work. And it's very difficult to get out of the middle. I know that. It's very difficult to get out of the middle. You spend a long time wanting to have some kind of, some kind of acknowledgement that, yes, this is true. This is right, what you're doing or what you're saying. And it's a weird thing how that works. You kind of spend time in that mode of thinking until you realize that it isn't about me, it's about the word. And then you start doing that and focusing on that. And it's about that time that you start hearing people saying things that are nice. That's how it is. But truly, it's, I say this for your benefit, as well as my own, of course, but I say it for your benefit. I mean, I am teaching, yes, and I want to teach, and I hope that what I'm doing is useful and helpful, and maybe it is, and maybe it's not. And some of the things that I've tried over the years were more effective or less effective. I'm sure that's true, and probably even today is still happening. But in the final analysis, you're the one who's teaching in your life, your family, your friends, your coworkers. I'm not teaching them, you are. And you face all the same things that I do. And in that you're not sure how it might be received, or whether somebody might be upset with you, what they might think about you, whether they're even listening to what you're saying at all. That's not limited to the preacher. Or the Bible class teacher or the elder. That's all of us when we're in this world. Will the world listen? Is anybody listening? Is anybody interested in the truth? Well, yes, the answer is yes, they are out there. And God will bring them to us and send us to them too. You just keep sowing the seed. You keep working the work. And the increase will come because it's God's, and He's the one who gives it. And that's what you want. Because you can control that. You can live right. You can do what is right. That you control. And you can be ready for the judgment. Today, are you ready for the judgment is the question. Are you ready to answer to God for the things done in the body? Have you done wrong and need to repent? Need to become a Christian, perhaps? We have water prepared that you might be baptized in the name of Christ, putting to death the old person, to be resurrected also in the name of Christ, becoming a Christian. Are you a Christian who has sinned and need to be restored to God? We'll pray with you and for you. But the judgment is coming, and we're going to give answer whether we've done evil or whether we've done good. Have we been engaged in the works of God to uphold the weak, to support those who need assistance in life? God knows, and He'll repay. And it's an instance of selfless service. Quiet, perhaps, unrecognized. And that's good. That's fine. God will get you. The judgment will be sure. The judgment will be just. If today you need the prayers of the saints as a Christian, we're glad to pray with you. If today you need to obey the gospel, don't put that off. Be right with God. Be earnest with your God and with yourself. It's the only way to make it through this life into eternity. If we can help you to obey the gospel, we can help you with our prayers. Let your need be known now by coming to the front while we stand and sing.